Grab a seat, everybody. We are getting ready to get started. We have a brief announcement from Pete.
At the refreshment time tonight, we're going to do, so it won't interfere with the meeting, we're going to set up a demonstration at near the refreshment table on QLF. Are you sending with your left foot? So CW operators understand what that means, and so we have a device here which will help test that. Would you hold this? And here is the J38, and we're going to have operators.
Hadley version.
We're going to have operators operate this with their left foot while we have other people judging. So come on back to the refreshment table and try your left foot, and let's see how it works. And so it's going to be kind of a prototype test tonight, just to see whether everything is going to be in its place and going to do what we want it to do. So that'll be at refreshment time.
Fantastic. That looks like a lot of fun. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the meeting of the Vienna Wireless Society. I'm Dean Salalis, KK4DAS, Vice President. I have to tell you, when I took the job of Vice President, they told me there was only one duty, and that is to run the meeting when the President isn't available. And here we are at the second meeting of the year. I don't know. I think I was hoodwinked. Anyway, TNT tonight is going to be led by Doug, and we're going to be talking about FT8 and low, come on, what's the word? Weak signal digital modes.
Okay, well, good evening, everybody. I'm Doug Reese, and Mike, KN4VKN, and Ron, WA6YOU, will also be speaking on the panel. What we're going to do first is do some slides from me on FT8 and what's new, and then we'll pass it to Mike to talk about his experience, also with some slides, and then on to Ron to wrap it up. Now, for those of you who might be new to FT8, just wanted to remind you that I gave a talk on FT8 in 2017, and those slides are available on the website. I think the YouTube video is there as well. What I did was take a few of those slides from 2017 to go over the basics really quickly, and then added in some stuff about what's new. So that's how my part is going to work. And let's see if I can get the changer to work. Okay, well, we'll go into manual mode. Oh, there it is. Okay. All right, so you're probably aware that FT8 is a weak signal mode, and was created in part by Joe Taylor, who's a Nobel laureate, a radio astronomer, so who deals with weak signals, right? So, you know, it all makes sense. Stations, when working FT8, you synchronize your clocks. Stations start on the minute, and they transmit for a little bit less than 30 seconds. Then, well, it depends on the mode. Then there's a pause, and then the reply comes back. Now, in some of Taylor's earlier digital modes, you clicked for each thing. In FT8, there's only a few seconds, so it can be very highly automated. You can tell it to, okay, I'm going to start this QSO, go for it, and it'll actually step through all the steps of a QSO. All right, so it's always been good for DXing. Now there's a special mode for DXpeditions called the Foxhound mode, and I'll tell you a little bit about that. It's also now good for contesting, and that was actually true at last field day. Now, 2 field days back, I did a little bit of digital, and it was kind of hard to find anybody. Last year, a blue zillion of them. Became very popular. Okay, so here is what the software looks like. There are 2 windows in this FT8 WSJTX software. Up here is a waterfall. It's roughly 3K wide, and down here is the main window, which I'll show in more detail. So over here on the left, it's decoding every signal in that 3K space and color coding it, and you have some control over the colors. But in my particular case, green is stations calling CQ, red is stations calling me, and white is anything else in this window. Over here, it's decoding only what is happening on my receive frequency. And in this window, yellow was my transmissions and red was stations calling me. Let's take a quick look at a QSO. In this particular case, I was calling CQ. So you see a yellow message here, CQ AK4AO FM18. Took me a couple of calls before I got an answer. And here comes back AK1P. All I did was double click on him, or I might have checked call first, which says if you're calling CQ, answer the first call that you decode automatically. So you can, turn it on, let it call CQ, and just sit there and watch what it does. So here is the exchange. So I called CQ, and FM18 is my grid square. And he answered with my call, and his grid square. This next one, the -8 is a signal report, 8 dB below the noise. And then he answered Roger and my signal report. And here's a change. This is the slide from 2 years ago, and typically stations sent Roger, Roger, Roger at this point, and then they exchanged 73s. And that's gotten cut down now, so most of the time this station would send R73 or RR73, and then the other station, just replies with 73 and that's it. So you cut out one transmission. Okay, so that's FT8 in a nutshell. So what's new with FT8? Well, there is a mode FT4, which does 15-second intervals instead of 30 seconds, so it runs faster. On the other hand, it's a bit less sensitive than FT8, and so far I would say there are people doing it. You can find them. It's a bit less popular than FT8. A Foxhound mode. That's a mode for de-expeditions, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But that is for stations who are going to generate a pileup, and now it has a special mode for dealing with pileups that's pretty neat. And then there's the contest mode, and basically what that's all about is in a contest, there's a contest exchange, right? Like maybe it's 4A, VA for field day. Well, now you can tell it to send the contest exchange, and therefore it can support a contest. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about Foxhound mode. What happens is the hound is you, the fox is the DX station. And there are lots of you, and there's only one fox, right? Okay. So the fox moves out of the standard watering hole frequencies for FT8. And I should have explained that there are certain dial frequencies you go to for FT8, and that's where everybody goes to do their FT8 thing. But if you're a de-expedition, you move away from that so you don't create your pile up, on that standard set of frequencies. And if you want to work Foxhound mode, you need to tell WSJTX that that's what you're doing, because the behavior changes. And here's the behavior. The fox owns the bottom 500 hertz of the 3K or so that he uses to do Foxhound mode. He owns that first 500 hertz. So he transmits there, and you only transmit there if he has called you. Otherwise, stay out of there. If he calls CQ and you answer him on any frequency below 1,000 hertz, he's not going to answer because the software will ignore anything down there. So he calls within the first 500 hertz. People call him above 1,000 hertz. And then when he answers them, they move on to his transmit frequency to reply. And that's all automated in the software. You know, all that shifting around and so on. Now, it's possible that you reply and the Fox doesn't hear you. And maybe he calls you again. You reply, he still doesn't hear you. Then he stops calling you. Well, you don't want to give up on the QSO, and what the software does in that case is detect that situation, and it moves you to a frequency between 500 and 1,000 hertz, and you can keep trying to get the Fox in that space. Again, very highly automated. Basically, what you do is you double-click on the Fox's signal to, teach WSJTX, what his call sign is and so on. And then you pick a transmit frequency and let her rip and sit back and watch and see when you've worked the Fox. And cross your fingers, and pretty soon a log it window will pop up. So it's no harder than that. Okay, this is what Foxhound looks like on my radio. And the 40-meter watering hole is 7074. FT8 has a very, very distinct visual signature on a pan adapter. So you see a whole bunch of signals that start on the minute, go almost a minute, pause, and then start up again. Right? I don't think any other signal looks like that. Well, what I was doing for the past while is looking for that happening outside of the watering hole. Remember I said foxes move out of the watering hole? So I would look for that, and when I found it, I would tune it and figure out what the base frequency was, and off we went. This is what it looks like in the WSJTX windows. And here are the Fox's signals. Hey, I said signals. One of the features of this is that the Fox can transmit multiple signals in any given period, so he can be working multiple stations at once. I've seen them go up to 6. Right? So they can really tear through a pileup very, very efficiently. So in this case, I found the Fox down here. I couldn't hear the hounds, although I could see over here. I was tuned to one of his transmit frequencies, and I could see him working various hounds, but I wasn't able to see them. This is actually the best slide, though, I could find during the week when I was saying, oh, gee, I need a foxhound slide like this. Okay, so how did I do? Well, my project for the last year was to work on something called the DXCC Challenge Award. You know what that is? To get that award, it takes 1,000 QSOs, and the combination of band and DXCC has to be unique. So 1,000 different combinations of band and DXCC. What's a DXCC? Well, it's what we use to be a proxy for countries, and it's sort of countries, but then they take geography into account. So for the US, there's continental US, and there's Alaska and Hawaii and US Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico and Guam and even Guantanamo Bay. Those all count as separate DXCCs. And generally where there's a separate political entity, that counts as a different DXCC. Now, the most interesting one I worked in the past year was the Sovereign Military Order of Malta. You would think that's in Malta, right? Well, it turns out that the Sovereign Military Order of Malta goes back centuries and was created by the Pope and so on. And I think it was 1683 or some date like that. The French invaded and kicked them out. So the Sovereign Military Order of Malta is 2 buildings in the city of Rome that have sovereign status like embassies. And there was somebody, doing foxhound, from there. But anyway, during the last year, so this is January 1st to January 1st, one measure that we use is how many DXCCs have we worked at all. And at the start of 2019, that was 181 for me. And at the January 1st of this year, I was at 210. So that's plus 29 during the sunspot minimum. Now, what about the DXCC challenge? Well, I had 856 points when I started. So this is, I got my license reinstated 10 years ago. So that's, the accumulation over that time period. But in the past year, I went from 856 to 1033, which is plus 177. So I didn't know if this was going to be a 1-year project or a 2-year project. Turned out to be a 10-month project. So works really great, and Foxhound is a big part of the answer. Okay, well, I'm going to turn it over to Mike, and I will switch to your slides, Mike.
Okay, thank you. Do I need that thing? Or you can click for me. Okay, Ron and I are kind of a match set. We're the eye candy of this presentation, so. That's what my, yes, exactly. No, I'm the new ham, and I've been a ham for working HF for 5 months, and Ron's the 50-year and 58-year ham. So just to show you how FT8 works for both of us. So as a new ham coming in at the minimum of the sunspot cycle, this could have been a very discouraging time for me, except for the digital mode, FT8 and FT4. So I'll just walk you through real quick some of the pointers I've learned, and hopefully will help you. And I actually learned a lot about this from during one of Doug's presentations. So the first thing I'll emphasize with FT8 is you need to have something that sets your computer clock time accurately. So I use a little thing that Harry showed me once called net time, and that can automatically keep it updated because your computer is orchestrating all the timing of the transmission and receive cycles for FT8 and FT4. So it's got to be very accurate. And on the screen, you'll see that there's, if you look at the columns across the top, UTC, DB, DT, that tells you how far off your computer timing is from that signal that you're receiving. So, and it'll actually color code that in purple, I think, or something if it's too far off. So, the other thing I'll point out is in the lower middle here, there's a CQ only button. If you push that, you'll only see CQs. I learned early on not to do that because you can find a lot of contacts that are not calling CQ. Some of the ones I wanted very much were not calling CQ. They were just lurking in the background, and they were coming out and hitting people as they saw them. So, and you can see if you look through the screen, as soon as you see somebody calling 73, that's your cue. You can hit him right away and initiate a queue. So, the other thing I would say is in the middle of the screen, there's this thing called hold transmission frequency, and that's a courtesy and also a convenience thing. On the waterfall screen, find an empty location where nobody's transmitting, and there's a way to set your transmit frequency using the screen. You click the button up here, hold transmission frequency, and you can just forget about it. You'll always be transmitting on that frequency. So, okay. Let's see. Next, yeah. So the other thing is, if you noticed in the screen, there were a couple different color codes than you might have seen on Doug's slides. And that's because of an add-on that I would highly recommend people get if you're going to work FT8. In FT8, you can get sometimes a couple dozen contacts, and it's very difficult to look through them all before the next transmit cycle and see if there's anybody of interest. And all you get is a grid locator for location in many cases for US states. So there's an add-on called JT Alert, and when you open JT Alert, you get a window that looks like this, and it displays all your FT8, FT4 contacts. And the nice thing about it is it shows you, for US, it'll show you the state that you're working. You can see the call sign and the state, not just US and a grid locator. It also allows you to set up the contacts that you're looking for, and it will color code those contacts when they show up, and it'll show them as for US states, mine's set up with a red background and yellow lettering. For DX contacts, it's yellow background with the red lettering. So at a glance, it lets you quickly decide which contacts are of interest to you and which are not. And these are all the things you can set up in JT Alert. You can list wanted call signs, wanted states, DX continents, CQ zones, blah blah blah. So you can go through the list. So you can set it up to alert, and you can set up a priority of alerts and what you want to see. Next. Next. Go quickly. It's got a lot of features. I mean, I haven't even explored half of them, and the ones I know about, people told me about. So if you hover your mouse over any one of these contacts, you get a pop-up window that shows you all the data that shows there, where he's transmitting, received signal, country, continent, CQ zone, et cetera, et cetera. The other thing I didn't point out, if you look up at the screen, you'll see on each side of the contacts, you might see a vertical bar on the left and on the right. If there's a bar on the left, that means that person subscribes to Logbook of the World. On the right, it means they do EQSL. And you'll see some boxes have a call sign and a B4. That means that you have worked that contact before. So that's very handy too. Next. You can also right-click on contacts and do a number of things, add to your wanted call signs list, et cetera, et cetera. So next. And this is a really cool feature, I thought, that puts a little bit more conversation in FT8 and FT4. It actually has a pop-up text window. And I learned about this, not by reading, but I learned about it by working FT8 one day, and it just popped up, and it was a note, and I looked in there, it was from WA8AHZ, and I said, Mike, how did you do that? So, and he walked me through that. But this is really cool. If you're working a contact, you can click F5, and this will pop up. And if it's got a little online above their call sign in the window, it means that they're online, and you can converse with them. And you can say, thanks for the QSO. If you look on the right, these are some older messages I had, but I had trouble working out contact with some people, and we just had a short conversation, and we're able to work things out. So, and I know some people that are starting to use this now, at the end of a QSO, just to, again, put a little conversation into it. Okay, next. The other thing I use when I'm doing FT8 is I use this thing called PSK Reporter, which is a nice tool that will let you see on any band for almost any kind of signal mode what your received signal is at other sites. So all those little thought bubbles or balloons or whatever are all contacts that are receiving me, and it shows you how long ago they received you. If you put your mouse on one, you'll get the little box in the lower left-hand corner. Gives their call sign, how far away they are, and what signal they are receiving you at, what their received signal. So if you're having trouble getting out and you don't know if they're receiving you, you can just call this up. I monitor this religiously when I'm doing contacts. So when I'm doing FT8, and finally, I use a 2-computer screen setup, and I've got on the left, I've got WSJTX, JT Alert, and PSK Reporter in the middle screen, and that's kind of how I work things. So, okay. And I'm going to turn it over to Ron here. I had some slides on a QSO mapping program, but I think due to the time, we'll kind of skip those. And, so with that, I will turn it over to the master.
Okay, thank you. First off, I want to thank Doug in 2017 for getting me into this. And I want to thank Lee for coming over and helping me set up Logbook of the World. So guys, it seems pretty easy, doesn't it? Seems like a easy way to do it. I've been a ham 58 years, and I have 6 DXCCs, but from other countries of the world. The one I have from this place, Fairfax, took me 35 years to go up to 315 confirmed. And I never did get a worked all states. I mean, I got the cards for a few states, but I never really pursued it. And then came this at sunspot cycle low. And I was kind of leery. I'm an old DXer like Terry, and we looked at it like, eh. I started on September 1st, and by Christmas I had worked all states, not only on FT8, but on FT4. I got them both. They send you a nice certificate. Isn't that why we're in this, guys? Come over to my house. I have 74 picture frames on my wall. There is no more room in my room for more frames. So if I get more awards, I'll start hanging them in the bathroom, I guess. Yeah, the ceiling. Also, Doug was talking about DXCC. We call them entities. I also had a DXCC, 100 entities by Christmas. So September to Christmas, I had that. And as of today, I'm at 115. A good example. Last night, I'm just sitting there. Let's see, I guess it was about 5 o'clock on 80 meters, just sitting there watching, and all of a sudden a big purple bar bings up in front of me. I had called CQ, and there was Lithuania called me for a new country. And so now I have to go, logbook of the world and all that, and we'll get that one confirmed. Today, it was even crazier. I was on 30 meters, which is 10 megahertz. Imagine 10 megahertz at 4 in the afternoon. And who pops up but Azerbaijan? You know how far away that is? And I clicked on him, got him, no problem, just in and out like that. And then I guess a few minutes later, Lee got him too. So these things, this is the sunspot cycle low. Guys, if it hadn't been for FT8 or FT4, I would not be in my radio room. I wouldn't be on CW, I wouldn't be on voice. I've done it all, and I wouldn't be there. But this came at the right time in ham radio, if anything did. One more award just came, and I don't have room for the picture frame, the work prefixes. I have 400 prefixes. I think I'm up to 600. I had 400 to get the award, 600 now. And Lee, you're up over 1,000, I believe, aren't you? Yeah. So guys, here's another thing. We were talking about Logbook of the World. Are a lot of you on Logbook of the World? It was hell to set up, wasn't it? I tell you what, I couldn't have done it alone. I mean, it was very complicated. But once it's set up, I dump my logs, and I know you dump probably right away. I dump my logs every Sunday at 0000 Zulu into Logbook of the World. Now, there's still a lot of countries where the operators are not on Logbook of the World. So you're forced to go get the QSL card the old-fashioned way. The return envelope, the self-addressed envelope, and I use $2 bills. I go get $100 worth of $2 bills at the bank, crisp uncircs, fold them once, and put them in the envelope. And you don't, like when Terry and I were doing this 30 years ago, you don't need airmail envelopes anymore. You just write par avion on the envelope and a regular white envelope. I got 2 in today. So guys, I've made a book, just like all my DXCCs, and I've started filing the cards that are not Logbook of the World, and I've got quite a few in here. So if you'd like to come up and take a look at these. I got a couple in the mail today. I got Curacao and St. Martin in the mail today, so it's kind of thrilling, just like before. In the old mail days, I spent hundreds and probably thousands of dollars on postage over the past. So anyway, that's my take on FT8 and FT4. I run pretty much 50-50. I do like FT4. It's a lot faster, not as sensitive, but sometimes you're just sitting there and these things pop up and they work them and then they're gone. That's the way propagation's been. So I highly recommend, if you're on HF, give it a try. And if you'd like to, come over to the house, sit right next to me. We'll make a few contacts, show you how it works. I've done that for quite a few people. But what we go over here is a little complicated, but you got it. So that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Awesome. So thank you, Doug, Mike, and Ron. So just a question, who's used FT8 or any of the digital modes so far? Pretty good. All right, yeah, I have too. It's one of the first things I did once I